Mr. Gupta, welcome to Big 550 KTRS.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Is it true you're calling us on the phone because the roads are so bad you can't even make it into the studio?
Oh, that would be interesting, but luckily that's not the reason. I have to testify at a hearing here in Jefferson City in a couple of hours, so that's the main reason. But I think you make a good point, obviously, around why we need to invest in infrastructure.
What are you going to testify in Jefferson City about today?
This is mostly about our electricity, water, and other infrastructure that basically we don't invest in it. It's something we all need and rely on. Can you imagine what life would be like if we didn't have electricity or challenged with water supply and water quality? This is something we all take for granted, and we don't want to think about having to invest in it to maintain it. Our systems are getting older and older, and we do need to spend money, and that's something that people are reluctant to do. And the question here is, what are the rules of the road? Because some of these services are provided by private companies, not by government, and there's a reason we do that, but then we regulate them in a way that makes it hard for them to make the investments.
The American Society of Civil Engineers gave the state a D+. Now, you mentioned water and electricity. Is that also included roads in that as well?
Today's hearing is more about the electricity, water, natural gas, and sewers, and not about transportation and roads, because those are privately provided and regulated by the state. So this is about how should the state regulate those public utilities that are investor-owned, but that we regulate, and should we regulate them differently? There's clearly a conversation to be had about transportation, which the government, of course, directly funds through other means, gas taxes and so on. So today's hearing is not about the roads. It's really about the other utilities that we depend on.
I thought every time you turn around, the Metro Sewer District is putting on another tax because they've got to spend another couple of $1 billion on the sewers to change the rainwater from the sewage and vice versa, and these are long-term deals, and so they're taxing us, and we're passing these taxes. So why is it so bad if we keep investing all this money in these sewers?
I think the challenge is we are, let me use the electricity and water as an example. You can keep putting more and more resources into more and more infrastructure. What you need to do is figure out how we as consumers also use that infrastructure, and there may be better ways to then just put more money into, sewers or pipes or power lines. You may want to basically work with the customer to say, hey, have you thought about putting a tree or planting this or that? There are other ways to manage what we call, green infrastructure, and look at it on the demand side. Why do we need something? And maybe we can more, in a cheaper way, get at some of the solutions through other means. And like in electricity, we waste 10, 20, 30% of our electricity in our homes and offices. Rather than building a new substation or doing something else, not that we don't need to maintain that infrastructure, but we also should be looking at what's happening on the customer side, and there may be a less expensive option that requires the utilities to work with their customers rather than think that the first strategy is to build something new.
Mr. Gupta, what do you want people to take away from this conversation? What's the one thing you want them to know?
The main thing is that the way we regulate utilities matters. It creates an incentive for them in terms of how they should spend money. So it's not about whether they do or don't spend money. It's do they spend the money on the right things. We should be interested in the services we get from them, and we should reward them based on their service, their performance, not their input. It's not looking at what they spend necessarily. It's looking at, do we get the things we want from them? So I'm for what we call performance-based regulation. Don't regulate the inputs to these companies, regulate the outputs. What are we getting in terms of service, and what are we paying for? So it's a different way to regulate these companies that are providing a very, very important service. So I'm never an anti-utility guy, because these are essential services we all depend on. But how we regulate them creates the incentive for them to invest in the right way rather than the wrong way.
You shook Gupta with the National Resource Defense Council. Thank you for your time, sir.
You're welcome.
726 Big 550 KTRS. We've got numbers and a lawsuit from a